Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Los Angeles Rams Insider Podcast. I'm your host and beat writer, Brock Vieira. You can check out all of our work and all of our coverage from tonight's NFC Championship game on Rams on SI. To get there, just go to www.si.com/NFL/Rams/on SI, where we drop double-digit pieces of content every single day. So right now, I'm on the field here at Lumen Field. The Rams, of course, came up short in their contest for a trip to the Super Bowl. The Seattle Seahawks took this one in the end, and there's a lot to take away from this game. First, let's start off with the good, because there was a lot, and unfortunately, it will get clouded because of the negative things that happened in this contest. First off, Matthew Stafford was brilliant tonight. There really isn't any criticism you can say about the man. He is the first quarterback ever in NFL history to lose a playoff game in which he threw for 350 or more yards, 3 or more touchdowns, and had 0 turnovers. On a night that they needed him to show up, he showed out. And his top two wide receivers, Davante Adams and Puka Nacua, were right there with him. We already knew what kind of player Puka Nacua was, especially in these moments, especially in a game up here in Seattle, given his history. But for Davante Adams, coming back from that hamstring injury, we really didn't know where he was at. Tonight, he was again magical, and he started to revert back to that form we started to see throughout the parts of the season where the Rams had championship ambitions. However, as good as they were tonight, they weren't good enough to overcome the massive issues on defense and special teams. Special teams, they had two bad plays, both by Xavier Smith. First was a muff punt that Smith was able to get back on, and the second one was a muff where Smith was somehow fell on the ground because he slipped and it hit off of him, and that led to Sean McVay and the staff putting in Kyron Williams to return punts for the rest of the game. And that's essentially how Smith's season has ended. It's strange that out of all the issues that could have happened on special teams, it was Xavier Smith that came up with the error, considering he's been one of the more consistent players for this team throughout the entire season. But it is one example in a series of them that exemplify the massive overlook that this front office has given to the special teams. In other top organizations, when you have a good special teams, it typically means you have a solid program. That's why special teams coordinators are so highly sought after in demand, especially if you're at that level. When you also look at good special teams, typically there are certain players, certain special teamers that set the standards for the league. Those are guys that have been there 3, 4, 5 years as a special teamer. They understand their role. They're typically captains, and they go out there and they make sure that everything that could go wrong doesn't, because everyone's on the same page, communication-wise, scheme-wise, whatever it may be. The Rams do not have that. They might have that in Troy Reader, but that could be next year. It wasn't this year. You look at how they went about their special teams. Continuously calling up guys from the practice squad to fill in into certain spots. Continuously move around the roster so that different guys play different positions in different weeks. Essentially, the way the Rams treated special teams, it was almost as if, here's our leftovers, make it happen. And as much criticism as Chase Blackburn might deserve for his early season errors, you have to question, was he given the proper resources to succeed, considering the fact that the Rams ended their season with a different kicker and a different long snapper. Alex Ward and Joshua Carty were expected to be the guys coming into the season, and they were. And they didn't perform up to standard. And for Joshua Carty, it's an even worse situation because he was doing good as a rookie. And then the Rams tried to institute that knuckleball kickoff that completely messed him up. And he has yet to recover, and that's why he's no longer a member of the Los Angeles Rams. But Harrison Mevis, at least they have a kicker who's only missed one kick and was perfect throughout the entire postseason. And of course, they have a longtime veteran in Jake McQuaid. But despite the personnel changes and the eventual changes to the coaching staff, with Ben Kotwika getting elevated, and of course him bringing in Matthew Harper, it still wasn't enough to get the standards up to championship level. That's a big reason why the Rams were not celebrating on this field tonight. You have to wonder, at what point does McVay or Les Snead or someone, when do they do something that completely changes the narrative, at least in the short term, when it comes to this problem? Because this is a cancer. It keeps growing in ways that we haven't seen before. And it happens on a night like tonight, where, of course, Xavier Smith must multiple punts. But it's not like this was the only issue this postseason. Going back to last week, we talk about Ethan Evans' bad punt, or even before that, the issues in Carolina with the blocked punt, or even before that into the regular season. no matter what, it's a continuous process. And by no means am I saying anything negative about Sean McVay or his job prospects or Josh. No, no, nothing at all. But if he wants to take that step and be that elite level coach, all those guys have phenomenal special teams. And when you look back at his early success, who was there? Guys like Johnny Hecker, guys like Greg Zerline, guys like John Fassel, who is the special teams coordinator. Proven McQuaid, proven and tested guys that know how to get things done. And they just don't have that. Then you look defensively, right? As much as I want to hammer the lack of investment to special teams, the lack of investment to defense was even worse. Of course, we can talk about the defensive backroom because there was no investment into it. The only time they got close was a potential reunification with Jalen Ramsey, which ended up not happening due to financial reasons, even though the Rams paid Tutu Atwell $10 million this season to spend the playoffs in street clothes. Neither here nor there. Not only was not that investment there was barely any investment in the linebacker. Say what you want about Nate Landman now, but when Landman first came on, he was surprised everybody for how good he was because nobody expected him to be that effective. Why did no one expect him to be that effective? Because he wasn't that effective before in Atlanta. Okay, because the new place, new system, new scheme has success early. Excellent. But it doesn't take away from the fact that the Rams were fully content to once again walk into this season with a linebacker room they had no investment. And before anyone says, oh, what about Sean Dolak? Sean Dolak was an undrafted free agent who barely got any play time on defense. Troy Reader, as I mentioned, is a full-time special teamer. Omar Spates was already there as another undrafted guy. And this has been something that's happened time and time again. Linebackers, unfortunately, are viewed very much like running backs are. And we're starting to see in the modern NFL that the lack of perceived value is causing teams to lose, whereas teams that invest in those positions are winning. Of course, the Rams got lucky with Lumen so far, but you have to wonder what can they expect from him next year? And is it time to potentially bring in another partner in that linebacker room to help supplement? Because there is a clear deficiency when the linebacker's out there and when they're asked to go into pass coverage. Then you look at the overall defensive construction. Christian is going to get a lot of flack for this game, and rightfully so. But what can you expect from a guy that has one of the cheapest defenses in the NFL? Now, this defense is filled with a bunch of dudes. But as any great defense needs, you need star players at certain positions. You need a shutdown corner. You need a star pass rusher. And for the most part, you need either a hybrid linebacker or a middle linebacker, some type of player that can help fill in that gap. They have that with Quentin Lake, so at least they have that part. But when you look at that star pass rusher, Jared Verse did not take that step that we expected this season. Yes, he goes and he puts pressure on the quarterback. Yes, he puts hurries on the quarterback. But he has been unable to secure sacks at the level as which was expected of him, that he put on himself. He came into the season saying that he looked at the film last year and he left at least, 10 sacks, he said, on the board? Well, you look now, how many more did you leave on the board? What steps are you going to take to be better? What moves can you put into your arsenal? Then you look at the rotations. Are they properly using Braden Fisk correctly? Is he on the field long enough? Are they doing too much with the rotations? Are the rotations so predictable that teams are seeing what they put out there and then run the opposite of what they're supposed to do? All right, we're going to line up. Teams are going to come out into their typical run package. The Rams are going to respond with a typical run defense or base defense. And then what are they doing? Passing on it. Play action. Shift everybody to the right on the fake run before a quarterback rolls out to the left or the opposite way. And they are getting massive yardage downfield by doing that simple tactic. That's what Seattle did tonight. That's what Chicago did last week. And it's going to continue to happen until there is that proper investment. Then you look at the overall operation. And this was a championship team. This was a championship roster. You can take everything I said and you can throw it out the door because at the end of the day, had the Rams executed in the critical moments, they would have won this game. But then that goes back to team culture. How can you expect a team to have the type of culture that you need in order to win a game like this when you aren't bringing the guys in who are able to elevate their squad? Look at how Seattle built the defense. Strong investment in the draft. Guys like Witherspoon and Iman Wari and other members of the secondary. They found cheap pickups that provided a lot of value. Guys like Ernest Jones. And then you look at that defensive line. They stacked it with veterans. Leonard Williams, DeMarcus Lawrence, so on and so forth. When are the Rams going to go out there and bring in a guy of that caliber? Why are they going to bring in a guy of that caliber? All I'm going to say is this. Devontae Adams and Max Crosby have a phenomenal relationship, and it does seem that Crosby is not content with the situation in Las Vegas. The Rams do have 2 first-round picks. I is curious to see how they manage those. Do they use one of those to go out and trade for a top player, like the Eagles did in 2022 when they had 2 first-round picks? They used one on Jordan Davis and they used one to trade for A.J. Brown. How the Rams manage these situations in this offseason is going to define the next 5 to 10 years of the McVay era, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how things work out for them. But there's one major lesson to take away from tonight. It's that the entire operation let Matthew Stafford down. And while Stafford will not put blame on others, because that's the type of guy he is, when you are the only quarterback in NFL history to have that stat line and still lose, it's indicative of not just the team, but the entire overall operation. The Rams, let's talk about the brain trust. Well, hey, you did a great job this offseason to get you guys to this point, right? The continuous growth from the post-Super Bowl era, the first one they won in 2021. Made the wild card in 23. Made the divisional in 24. Now you make the NFC Championship game in 25. But this is the moment where you got to be surgical, where you need to make the bold move and the correct move in order to get this team back to where they need to go. And to be frank, if we really want to start diving into it, when you look at Sean McVay's playoff record, it looks great. When you start breaking down the performances, it's not exactly spectacular. You look back at the 2021 season. They probably should have lost to Tampa Bay had Todd Bowles not sent the house and the car and the yacht and the cousin's car and his daughter's car, right, everything on the house to try to end that game where Stafford was able to hit Cooper Kupp over the top to then hit the game-winning field goal. Then in that NFC Championship game, Stafford threw a near pick to Jaquizzi Tartt. That Tartt just straight dropped. So there's that kind of lack of execution, and the Rams were only able to finish up that game with a couple field goals to ice it. Then you start looking at that 2023 game, the 1-point loss to a Detroit Lions team that were very good, but hadn't won a playoff game since like the 90s. And then you start looking now, the disaster that was almost in Chicago with horrific play calling, the defense tonight. Then you look at that Carolina Panthers team, and while the Panthers roster was built to attack every single weakness of the Rams, there was still a team that didn't finish the season with a winning record. They got swept by the Saints. It cannot happen. To me, while this night is disappointing, it is a revealer. The Rams championship window is closed, but a new one is opening very soon. If they can nail this offseason, I expect them to be back to this point. But if they don't, I think we're having some long-term conversations about Sean McVay, his legacy, Matthew Stafford's legacy, was Stafford let down again by another organization, and more. And trust me when I say, nobody wants to enter that conversation. This has been Brock Vieira for the Los Angeles Rams Insider Podcast. We'll catch y'all next time. Take care.